Erika, welcome to Political Hope.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here.
So we always start with the question, what does political hope mean to you?
Oh my gosh, it means people finally realizing that the problems that we have are not that hard to solve, that it's actually very straightforward. I mean, I think everybody's in this moment, Indy, where they're like, holy Toledo, it's chaos, it's cruelty, it's insanity. Like, what in the world is happening to what I understood? And can we ever get there again? And the big message I have for people is like, this is not that complicated. It really isn't. And the people in charge make it complicated on purpose because they want you to feel powerless. And you are not powerless. You have a tremendous amount of power, and we can fix this and then just get back to living.
Yeah, and that's powerful because what you're saying is that it's tangible. It's not out of people's reach,
Oh
right?
my gosh, no. And in fact, I think that that's the thing that has come that I really understood after climbing into this for as long as I have. It's just not complicated. It really is. There's a really straightforward way to structure a society so the vast majority of people are good.
Oh,
That's
totally.
what we're going for. And I think that that's one thing that it's really important to emphasize, particularly with a group like the Patriotic Millionaires.
Mhm.
Because sometimes people just say, oh, those are just, a bunch of altruistic people. They're just a bunch of bleeding hearts. I got to tell you something. Our members are not bleeding heart anything. And as our chairman says, he's like, I ain't even more altruistic than the next guy. I'm just greedy for a different kind of country.
Wow.
I mean, here's one thing to know about the Patriotic Millionaires. We like rich people. We like people being rich. We think living a life of abundance is the point, however you want to define that abundance spiritually, emotionally, in your friendships, and in the resources that you go out and get for yourself and your family and your community. So we're looking to build a rich, prosperous, and stable country with a ton of rich people and an enormous middle class. We're here for the good and the fun. This is nobody's trying to make anybody wear a hair shirt.
Yeah, I love that you're saying this because I also like the feel. I feel like we have an opportunity to reimagine that in the 1950s there was like this New Deal, right, and this shift and this like everybody kind of grew in wealth, right, at that point. But it required a lot of turmoil, a lot of dissonance, and I feel we're kind of having that similar kind of moment of like great dissonance before there's some sort of action of collective resilience that creates the wealth, recreates the wealth, right?
Well, and you can call it dissonance, but you can also just say it like everybody's pissed off, and they should be. I mean, this is the thing in my mind. Like everybody in America is pissed off at everybody else in America about everything all the time.
Yep,
That's essentially what I feel like we're living in.
yep.
And part of the reason we're living there is because a very, very small group of incredibly powerful and incredibly rich people have rigged an economy to make everybody feel scared.
Mhm.
And what happens when people feel scared, especially, no offense to the men in the room, but when people feel scared, they get mad
Yep.
and they rightfully get mad.
Yep.
And so right now people are mad and they're mad because they're economically insecure and they're economically insecure because a whole bunch of rich people work together over multiple decades to make sure that when they structured the machine that is our economy, that a very small group of people got most of the rewards of it while everybody else was struggling. And so now the only way they can pull that off is if they make the everybody
Yep.
get pissed off at everybody else. And
Yep.
so now everybody's having these conversations about stuff like transgender athletes
Right.
and all of this. And you know what it's about, Indy? It's about money.
Yes.
It's about money. This is about money.
Mhm.
So let's just get the money part right. And then I trust most people to turn out to be relatively decent people and kind of like get on with things. So we're here to talk about the money.
I love that you're hyper focused on that and that this organization and its intentions are hyper focused on that because even at the local level I've been kind of like diving into local government and local politics and everything is always you can't solve any of the local problems because there's never enough money and I'm like wait there is definitely money but it also is like there when you have organizations and companies not paying the taxes properly and they're using the public like they're using the public wires they're using the public land they're using the public and then they're even polluting on top of it, but they're not paying their right. It's like, wait, there is money. It's just not going to the right place and it's not being processed the right way.
Well, and Indy, that's exactly right on the tax front. So Patriotic Millionaires work on two pieces of this. We work on wages and we work on taxes. We started with the tax system 15 years ago when President Obama decided that he was going to extend a bunch of tax cuts for people making north of $1 million a year. And it just pissed me off. And we got some millionaires to say, like, this is absurd. For the good of the country, raise my taxes. But taxes is only half of the equation. So look at this as a couple of bookends. You want to keep those books tight and held standing up straight. You've got to have both the wage side and the tax side. So this is pre-distribution and redistribution. And so, we don't have people making up money from the jobs that they do that make other people money.
Right.
And then when the wealth accumulates, because we've got distortions in the market, the
Right.
wealth accumulates, concentrates in a small group of people. And then our tax system is the mechanism through which we're supposed to move that disproportionately concentrated wealth off of the individual to whom it was directed unfairly and in a way that is bad for the whole. And we take that redistribution and we invest it in the society in general. But
Right.
it's the two pieces of it. It's very important to understand this: wages, taxes, wages, taxes, wages,
Mhm.
taxes. When somebody's talking about the economy, they usually want to talk about 9,000 different things
Mhm.
and they want to talk about all those different things.
Mhm.
This is about wages and taxes. Because let me tell you something, who can afford a house? Somebody who makes a decent wage.
Mhm.
Somebody who can afford a car, somebody who makes a decent wage.
Mhm.
And so the very best way to structure an economy from the get go is to guarantee that people make a fair share of the proceeds of business and to operate our business construct basically by saying, look, if you can't afford to pay someone something they can live on,
Right.
you cannot afford an employee. That's it. And it's okay. Be a sole proprietorship.
Sure, sure.
Work until you've got that business idea strong enough
Right.
that you can pay somebody else something they can live on. Then you have a business. If
Right.
you're paying somebody something they can't live on, I hate to say it, you don't have a business. You have a human exploitation scheme. And that's a very, very different exercise. So let's start the economy pre-distributing from the front end through wages.
I mean, I love that you're bringing up the pre-distribution bookend because that's kind of so alive right now with what's happening with, immigration and all that. I mean, my family immigrated from Punjab, from India, but they were able to buy a house off of that being immigrant laborers, right? My dad was a carpenter, my mom was a seamstress, and they literally built a family and a life. And that's not possible right now. And sometimes you actually get exploited because you can take advantage of people who are the laborers, right? And that's really alive right now, right? And so I'm glad you're bringing that up. I also noticed that even there's nurses, this week I think there's nurses striking in Oakland because nurses and teachers and some of the hardest workers in our communities can't afford to live and do those jobs. So like you're bringing up something very, very
I think he's
alive
in
at
and out.
this
Like,
moment.
pop him out. Is he gone? No, he's just frozen.
Oh, it looks like it's frozen, huh? You can also if it helps, you can turn off the video too and see if that helps the oh, there you go.
Okay, here we are again. I don't know if that was you or me.
I have no idea. That was really funny. It just completely just froze right there, but I'm glad you're back.
Yes, we're
Um
back.
Yeah, I mean, just to complete that, I feel what you're saying is very alive with what's happening in the current dynamics in the country, and especially around not just wages, but how do we empower the working class, right? For them to actually have the financial ability to buy homes, to take care of their families, to have the means to be able to support themselves. What do they say? By the bootstrap, pick yourself up by the bootstrap kind of thing, right?
Well, I mean, it's a lot easier to pick yourself up by a bootstrap if you've got a law that makes a bootstrap possible.
Right.
I mean, here's the thing. We currently live in an economy where 40% of people in the country make less than the median cost of living for a single adult with no children. So it costs around, there's a great tool. It's called the MIT Living Wage Calculator. You can just Google it and you can go into any state, any county, any city and say, how much does it cost to live here? And they'll tell you, it's about, this much for rent, this much for food, all of this stuff. So at a very, very modest level, if you take the least expensive state in the country, which is West Virginia,
Mm.
West Virginia, you need around $40,000 a year to live in West Virginia. And that gives you about $9 a day for food, Indy. So this is not highfalutin living. Okay. This is very, very modest living. And so for a single adult with no children, they need around $40,000 to support themselves. That's $20 an hour if you're working 40 hours a week,
Right.
50 weeks a year. So it gives you a few days off. You got Christmas off, you got whatever you want off, but basically you're working full time 40 hours a week. Okay. $40,000 a year. 40% of people make less than that.
Wow.
70% of people in the country make less than what it costs for a single adult with one child.
Wow.
And so here's what's really happening is we've got a lot of people who can't make ends meet because we have a law that allows people to legally pay people 7.25 an hour. So let me I'm going to give you the 1, 2, 3 on wages. Okay. Wage policy. This is how much are you required by law to pay somebody for the work they do for you? The federal government has a number that they're trying to set for the country as a whole.
Mhm.
And then a bunch of different states can set the number higher. They can't set it lower, they could set it higher. And then some states, you can also have localities, cities or counties can raise it. And in some places you can't. So where I'm originally from in North Carolina, only the state folks can change the wage. They can't change the wage in cities. And so right now the wage in North Carolina is $7.25 an hour. It's $2.13 an hour if you are a wait staff. So if you make tips. So when I was a waitress, when I was 18 and in college, I worked at this little spot called Spanky's in Chapel Hill.
Nice.
And I made $2.13 an hour. If I went back and got a job there today, I would make $2.13 an hour. So basically what you're saying is here are some states in the country where you can pay somebody 7.25 an hour. Well, we just learned that in the cheapest state in the country, West Virginia, takes about 20 bucks an hour, $40,000 a year to support yourself. So if somebody's making 7.25 an hour, that is less than half
Wow.
of what it takes. So you would have to work 100 hours a week to just be able to afford to put $9 worth of food in your mouth, and to live someday. And I've looked at these places where the amount they allocate you for rent, and most of these places, there really are not even places to rent
Right.
at that amount. And so we're talking about a very modest amount of living. And then we have basically 70 or 80% of our people, depending on their family size, who cannot make ends meet. Of course, everybody's pissed off.
Right.
Well, the question is this necessary? Do we have to have an economy that is really a human exploitation scheme? And I want to say, let's look at the CEO pay. And
Mm.
let's say, well, those CEOs seem to be finding a whole bunch of money to pay themselves. It's just shocking how they can't pay their hourly workers more. Back in the day, back in the 50s, Indy, you were talking about that earlier.
Mhm.
It used to be that the CEOs made around 30 times what a regular person made, around 30 times. That number today in some of these companies is 1,400, 1,800, 3,000 times
Wow.
what the lowest paid workers make. And then these businesses say, whoa, we can't raise that pay. They can't raise the pay because they're directing it all to the CEO.
Right. It's almost sociopathic. I mean, to have to that extreme, there's no way that somebody 3,000 creates 3,000 times more productivity than somebody like you've. That's
Well, and actually it's great that you bring up productivity because this is what we see. There's a great chart that we have if you go on our website and you go into the great economy project section of our website. This is a project that we started about 4 years ago when all of the Democrats, and here, so click on this, want a great community, start with a great economy. We decided, so let me tell you how we started this. Go up to the webinars up there and you'll see it. Click on the button that says the webinars and then scroll down, look at the big picture. This
Mhm.
is the one. Take a look at this. This is a great presentation. There's me. There's me trying to explain everything that happened in the United States economy in the last 60 years. And there is a chart in there. If you keep on scrolling, you'll see a chart. That's well, the broken social contract. That's a good. This shows how oh, that one. This is the one. All right. So freeze on this one. I want you to take a look at this chart. Okay, what you basically see in this chart, these two lines are hourly compensation and productivity. Productivity is, how much work can you get accomplished?
Right.
Okay. And then hourly compensation is how much are you paid for that hour. So if you look from back in the day, you
Mhm.
basically see productivity and hourly compensation tracking. So as workers created a little bit more, they made a little bit more. And so things track nicely together. What you see there is in about the mid 70s, things started to split and productivity went through the roof. So the economy, workers were making more stuff than they had made before with less hours of input.
Mhm.
But look at that, hourly compensation stays the same. So that big gap between those two numbers is all the money that got concentrated into the very rich.
But Erica, like what happened at that juncture? Like what's that? What happened there?
A few things happened. And they kind of happened on top of one another and they all fed into this problem. So one of them is that the bottom fell out of the wage floor. And what I mean by that, so you can think of the wage floor, the minimum wage is the wage floor. That's the floor that everybody stands on. You need a floor. Just picture standing in your house.
Right.
If you jump up and down on your kitchen floor and you fall through to your basement, that's not a strong floor.
Right.
The wage floor acts the same way. We need a wage floor that is strong enough for people to stand on and strong enough for them to put a ladder on so they can climb up into the middle class. The wage floor from 1968, that's when the minimum wage hit its peak. And that's actually, interestingly, Indy, it's when the McDonald's introduced the delicious sandwich, the Big Mac. The Big Mac was introduced in 1968 when,
Whoa.
I mean, who doesn't love a freaking Big Mac?
I mean,
I heard that Julia Child loved a Big Mac.
what?
Okay. Okay. So the gourmet of gourmet. So anyway, 1968 with the minimum wage, you could buy 3.5 Big Macs.
Interesting.
Today, if you work an hour at minimum wage, you can buy one Big Mac, no fries.
What?
No wonder everybody's so pissed off, right? And so
Wow.
that's the thing. So the bottom fell out of the wage floor. Then you've got Bill Clinton coming in passing NAFTA.
Not
So
that.
next time Democrats act like they didn't do anything to anybody working people and why don't they vote for him anymore? Cry me a river. I'm going to just say point back to Bill Clinton and NAFTA.
Mhm.
Okay. And if you look at the areas in the country, Indy, where MAGA is the strongest,
Mhm.
it's the areas in the country that NAFTA devastated communities.
Mhm.
So
Not to mention like India and like other implications of why so many immigrants. Like my family came from India because of what NAFTA did in India. So there's a lot of that too.
that's right. And then, so off go the jobs overseas where the labor laws are much slacker than they were here. Then you have the bottom that fall out of the wage floor here. Then you rip apart the tax system. So none of this extra money is reinvested. It's all going into smaller and smaller personal hands. And that gap right there between productivity and hourly compensation, according to the Rand Corporation, which is a corporation who studies stuff and it's full of a bunch of smart people. Let me say that
Mhm.
$93 trillion dollars that moved from working people to the upper class. And then technology is also in there. I should not have put that as a small factor. That's a big factor. But when you've got technology, do you want that technology and those gains in productivity to make it so that Jeff Bezos's girlfriend can fly with some of her gal pals into space?
Mhm.
Or do you want to spend that money making sure that the folks who are working for Amazon are making a decent living so they can, take their kids to Disney World or go to the ballpark.
Mhm.
Those are the choices we're making. We have structured an economy to put people like Jeff Bezos in space while people who work for Jeff Bezos are living in their cars.
Yeah.
It's that productivity gap. And so it's a lot of different things. And the important thing to remember, Indy, is it was politicians of both parties
Yeah.
over decades. Okay. And so now we're in a place where Democrats and Republicans can't stand each other.
Yep.
They can't, basically, we can't stand any of our political leaders. And we really shouldn't, because the fact is, there is math
Right.
on this exam. It costs a certain amount of money to feed yourself and your children and to provide yourself shelter. And you trade your time for money.
Yep.
And if you have to trade too much of your time, number one, you don't have time to actually have a life.
Mhm.
And number two, which is what we're all here for. I mean, it is the greatest gift, life. And we put people in circumstances where they can't enjoy their life. And then we get pissed off at them because they're not showing up at PTA meetings and their kids are running wild. Well, if you're working 100 hours a week, where are you supposed to find this time? So we have we really screwed the pooch here, Indy. But the great thing is it's easy to fix. That's the great thing.
Yeah, and that kind of brings up, what this potential solution does. And like I would love for you to share this, but I'm also curious because the other side of the bookend, right? Yes, let's lift the floor for everybody. And also the other thing that I'm curious how you guys are approaching working, I mean, working is not the right thing, taxing the rich, but also like there's also a system set up to support the rich to like manipulate the system and not be taxed, right? There's all these like funds and trusts and blah blah blah. How do you deal with that?
Oh, my land, Andy, this thing is a flippin' mess. Let me tell you. So, just a little bit of background. So, it was 2010, lame duck session of Congress. It became clear to me that President Obama was going to cave to Republican demands to extend these tax cuts. So, I got a bunch of people with incomes over $1 million a year to sign this letter saying, for the good of the country, raise my taxes. And with that burst in hand, we started really looking at the economy as a whole. Now, all I knew then, Indy, was that my hopey, changey president, who I voted for,
Mhm.
was in the process. The more things change, the more they stay the same. I mean, and there was no reason for him to do it. So, with that little piece, I started, well, what else is in this tax code? What
Mhm.
else is in this tax code? Read and read, learned and learned and learned over the course of the next 15 years. And if people really knew what was in this tax bill, they would lose their minds. We have structured this tax code to I'll put it this way. Neither one of the parties seems particularly inclined to do anything decent with the tax code, and how we have structured it guarantees the death of the nation. I,
Wow.
I can't understate this. Okay. 71% of people in the country think the economy is rigged against them and in favor of the rich. Number one. Number two, I have news for them. They're right.
Wow.
Number three, how do you rig an economy? You start with the tax code.
Wow.
And so we have a tax code right now that guarantees we will become even more unequal, even more quickly over time. There comes a point where mathematically and historically, when you reach a certain level of inequality, you become vulnerable to authoritarianism, because when the economic system does not work for this number of people, they reject the political system. So, as democracy started being taken over by moneyed interests over multiple decades, who took over both the Republican Party and the Democratic Party and structured this economy so all of the benefits go to the people at the top, it's a game of economic jingo. We've been pulling from the bottom, pulling from the middle, loading up on top. Of course, the whole thing was going to fall down.
I mean,
So, what
I would love to add to that, Erica. That's very like unpatriotic. Like, I just want to add that. Like it's like if you don't want the system to survive, that's not American. That's not the American experiment. Like, I just want to like bring that into that. Like it's kind of crazy to not want to support the community, the system that you're a part of.
Well, but here's the thing. These are, I mean, this is really dark money. So this whole thing started in 1964, or the modern iteration of it. I would say that darkness of the human spirit has been around since the dawn of time. Okay, so we want to acknowledge that. But what I want to say is the circumstances that we're in right now, the history that I started with is around 1964 after the Barry Goldwater defeat, when a group of multimillionaires and billionaires got together and started saying, we want to structure the economy differently than it is structured right now. We don't want all this democracy. We don't want all these people having equal rights. We want to be able to manipulate the economy how we want. And they basically had two objectives, Indy. They wanted to eliminate their tax obligation
Okay.
and they wanted to dismantle the regulatory state. And let me say, dismantle the regulatory state. That sounds like shit. I might want to dismantle the regulatory state too. I mean, that sounds big. But let me tell you what that is. What that is stuff like a law that says you have to pay somebody something they can live on. That's a law that says people working in the heat doing construction have to have some times for a water break.
Uh,
That's what the regulatory state is. No, no, is it too big? Is it kind of cumbersome? I mean, sure. Anytime you build something over a long term time, it can always be shaped up and fixed. It doesn't need to be wholeheartedly dismantled.
right.
Okay. Now, their third thing that now that they have their tech, you know, have their tech minds and this tech influence. Now they want to dismantle the nation state
Wow.
as a whole. And they want to make sure that the United States is no longer the reserve currency of the world. And they want to run a series of fiefdoms. And so, what we want to do, patriotic millionaires, back to where we started, we want to live in a rich, stable, wonderful country that is full of lots of different kinds of people so you can learn lots of stuff and like have a cool experience. That's it. That's fun. So, how do we take the economy as it is currently structured and fix it so that we get to that point? And this is step number one. What you have up right now, a simple solution for a rich, stable country. The cost of living in the United States, in the cheapest place to live in the country, is around $40,000 a year. You have to have that amount of money. We currently start taxing people when they make $15,000 a year. So people are paying taxes on $25,000 of income, and every bit of that income is money they need to pay their own personal expenses. So patriotic millionaires have a real simple idea. Let's eliminate the federal income tax obligation until you can take care of yourself. Once you can take care of yourself, you can start contributing to the federal coffers. You can contribute to all of those things we want to do on our own. But until you can put food in your mouth and get yourself a shelter, you take care of you. The federal government should not be in the business of taxing people into poverty.
Erica, on this note, I'm curious, like, because I have colleagues, and I also have been through this process of, when you're going to, be a doctor or a nurse or a teacher, and you have to pay your loans, right? Well, how would that be included? Because there's so many Americans still paying loans that are in the working class, and that really affects a lot of stuff. Is that also included in this or like factored?
So I am not putting that in this account. We basically wanted to get to the most simple principle
Right,
that people across the political divide would agree on.
right,
The principle is the federal government shouldn't actively tax our citizens into poverty.
right.
So, what does it take if you're just your basic human? You didn't go to school, you didn't do this, not the extras. We've got to just start with the basics.
Okay,
Okay. You need to be able to support yourself before we demand that you pay for the country to run.
right,
Okay. And so that it doesn't cost the federal government any money,
right.
shift those revenues to people like our members who make north of $1 million a year. So the question we really have for politicians is when I told you we've got about 70% of people who make less than the cost of living for a single adult with one child, 40% make less than the single living with no children. So what we want to do is basically give a tax benefit to the vast majority of people in the country. About 70% of people will get meaningful money, hundreds, if not thousands of dollars into their bank account, shift the lost revenues to people like our members who make north of $1 million. And what that really is, Indy, is saying to somebody, will you give your working class constituents a tax break and make your millionaires pay for it? Make
Right.
your political donors pay for it? It's a big question. It's a big question for all these politicians. Are you willing to tax your donors a teeny little bit so that working people can have the dignity of self-sufficiency? That's it. And
Wow.
we'll see what people's answers are. So we've been out talking to lawmakers about this concept, want to turn it into a piece of legislation that does this exact same thing. So we've been talking to them about this concept. We'll turn it into a piece of legislation. And so we're asking people to go to, this is costoflivingexemption.com. You can also find it on Patriotic Millionaires, patrioticmillionaires.org. This is it.
Mhm.
A cost of living tax cut for people up to the cost of living around 40 grand. Shift the lost revenues to people who make north of $1 million a year on that first dollar
Mhm.
after your first million. So when you make $1,001, you'll pay a little 3% surtax on that. I think that that's a good first step to getting working class people stabilized a little bit. Um, and to introduce a concept that should be pretty obvious.
Yeah.
Like, why are we taxing our people into poverty? The Republicans are working on a big bill that they're going to push through right here in the next few weeks.
Mhm.
And Trump has gotten a lot of play for some of the ideas he's had, like no tax on tips.
Mhm.
You can keep your tip money. As somebody who was a waitress for a long time,
Mhm.
I appreciate that bucket of money in when you walk out. Andy, what percentage of people in the country do you think work for tips?
Oh, I would say a lot. Like
Okay, what do you think it is?
maybe 40%?
Nope, 3%.
3%?
Three, isn't that crazy?
I
That
thought it
number surprised me. I had to like research it a bunch of times. 3% of people in the country make tips. And so what Trump has said is 3% of y'all deserve a tax break. Nobody else deserves a tax break.
wow.
All the rest of working people should be taxed into poverty. There are all kinds of other problems with the legislation. I mean, one of the things that happened during COVID is when you make so many tips and you don't report all of that income, so many people who worked in restaurants didn't make enough income according to what they reported to get any COVID relief. So
Oh,
when COVID happened, they couldn't prove to the government, this is how much money I did make. So I need some COVID relief. So it was a problem in that way. But the bigger problem is that conceptually, we've got a president who's working on giving three people a tax break because they're in a specific industry. That seems kind of unfair. Why don't we say all working people should support themselves? And this piece of legislation would do that.
so on this note, I mean, I can't help but also imagine that are you guys also exploring ways to experiment with this tax code in different states? Because I know states can also, I mean, I'm in California, and like California, our taxes are very different than like a place like Texas, right? Especially income taxes.
Yes, that is totally true. So we work on taxes at all levels of government and also on the international front. We now have a chapter in the UK of Patriotic Millionaires
Oh,
UK. We
right.
have we just last week formally launched our Patriotic Millionaires Canada. We had a great
Oh,
television interview with some of our Canadian members because a lot of this stuff, what happens is, Indy, rich people hide their money all over the world.
mhm.
And so if you really want to solve the rich people hoarding their money problem, you got to deal with it on the international level. There's all kinds of places where you can make a difference. What we wanted to do first, though, is lay out, look, for us here in the United States, for patriotic millionaires, for United States patriotic millionaires, what kind of world are we trying to live in? And what does that mean for us for the economy? So we released a few years ago, we started really looking around with how do you structure an economy that has 350 million people in it, doing all kinds of things, from running a hedge fund to doing crypto coins to, working at Amazon, being a driver. We got all kinds. How are we going to structure this thing so we can get along better than we're getting along
Mhm.
right now? First thing, cost of living tax cut.
Mhm.
Shift the burden to the millionaires. Easy breezy, lemon squeezy. Not a person is going to feel it. Politicians have to make a choice. It's time for them to make a choice. That's number one. Number two, raise the minimum wage
Yep.
to the cost of living. And listen, we think raising the minimum wage is great for the economy as a whole. Indy, we have an economy that is driven by consumers buying things.
Mhm.
And so we need consumers with money to spend. consumers with money to spend come from employees who make a decent living.
Wait, so you're
So,
saying so you're saying rich people can make more money if citizens had more money?
oh my gosh, our members would make so much more money if the citizens had more money. Because what do citizens do when they have that money? They go out and spend it. They spend it at McDonald's. They spend it at buying a cell phone. They spend it going to the movies. They spend it. 70% of our economy is just people buying stuff.
Mhm.
And so, we often hear from small business owners, oh my gosh, I cannot afford to pay my employee anymore. Corners are so tight as it is. Let me ask you a question. What should you really care about? Should you care more about how much beer money all the folks in your bar have in their pocket on a Saturday night or how much you're paying one bartender?
Mm.
You should really care about your customers more. And so that's why a law needs to be a change. So this person maybe raises a little bit, this person raises a little bit. No, no, no. We want the whole system to come up so that we're guaranteeing a stable level of consumer demand to fuel our economy. And so raise the minimum wage to something somebody can live on, do it gradually over time. And we think this is good and people should just do it. Everybody wants small businesses, medium, large. But if that makes you nervous, all right, let's just slow it down a little bit. Start with companies that make more than $1 billion in revenue. I think they can probably afford to pay somebody working for them $21 an hour, then go down from there. And so small businesses can be the last people who have to do the new requirement, but they can have the benefit of the folks from the larger companies coming in and spending money. So that's the second piece. Those two pieces alone, Indy, would stabilize the economic lives of working people in this country in a way that would do what we need it to do, which is loosen up their time to spend time with their kids, work on getting extra skills to get the next level of job, and get involved in their communities. So those are the first two. Third one is equalize ordinary income and capital gains. That's like so when you work for a living, did you know you pay twice the tax rate of people who live off their investments?
Wow.
That's a gobstopper. So, Indy, let me tell you something. If you made $100,000 this year, working 40 hours a week, 50 weeks a year, you would pay around $9,000 in taxes. If Jeff Bezos clicks a button on his E-Trade account and sells some stock, making a cool profit of $100,000, he pays $0.
Wow.
Okay. So here's Jeff Bezos clicking a button. He pays no taxes on his 100,000. Here's you working 40 hours a week, 52 weeks a year. You are paying $9,000 in taxes. And
Wow.
that's because our tax code says that capital income made from money,
Right.
is more important and should be treated better than money made from sweat. So basically, your money versus their sweat, their money is winning.
But that money that money that's made from the investment from the stocks or whatever, that is also affecting the job market. Like that's affecting the quality of jobs and the quality of pay. Like it's invariably connected. So you can't
Well,
not.
in as much as everything is basically connected, you're right. But the capital gains rate, it's a few steps removed from affecting how much money you're making on your job. What we need to do on the job is to raise the legal pay. And we either need to do that we need to do it at the federal level for the long term. But in the meantime, about 30 states pay significantly more than $7.25 an hour right now. There are just a whole bunch of states, like the state I grew up in, North Carolina, who they haven't moved yet.
Mm.
And then there are localities who can raise their wages, but not in states that won't let them. So I don't know if you remember a few years ago, the bathroom bill in
Right.
North Carolina. Do you remember the bathroom
Uh,
bill? So the bathroom bill was not actually a bathroom bill.
huh.
Charlotte wanted to raise the minimum wage for people in Charlotte. The North Carolina legislature did not want them to. So they passed a bill eliminating Charlotte's ability to raise its own minimum wage. And then they wrapped it in a transgender bathroom issue so they could get the Reverend Franklin Graham Billy Graham's boy on their side. That's how that whole thing played out. So again, this is just kind of back to the earlier conversation we were having, Andy. All of this is about money.
Yeah.
I don't care what they are talking to you about. If they are talking to you about, guns, abortion, LGBTQ,
Anything polarizing, anything polarizing.
anything polarizing they are talking to you about, they're stealing your money. It is misdirection. It's the same thing a magician does when he like pulls a rabbit out of a hat over here and then is stealing your money over here. So anytime somebody's talking to you about something that isn't money, they are stealing your money.
Mm-hmm.
If people don't remember anything from this podcast, that is what they should remember. If a politician is talking to you about something that doesn't have to do with money, they're stealing your money. So get in there and talk about this money.
I mean, and I can't help but notice, one of the things that we've woven through this conversation is the influence and the impact of the tech bros or whatever you want to call them, and there's tech sisters too, but they're kind of like not they're a little co-opted at this moment. But what is the thread that's being woven with there is tech and their influence with social media. Like we can't really that's a powerful tool right now that not just distracts people but polarizes them. It shuts them down. If you watch the news even a little bit on through social media, people, I mean, it's amazing to see how people are unable to then act out their civic responsibility, their social responsibilities because of this, right? And then you can see the politicians also kind of using the social media to distract and, dissolve. And so how do you feel, Erica, like as you're doing this? I mean, I know you guys are focusing on hyper focus on gathering millionaires and billionaires to be able to push this movement. But how do you see the grassroots aspect of what you're doing? Like how to cut through the distractions through social media that are actually quite intentional at this moment, I would say.
Oh my gosh, it's so intentional. Um, Here's how we are trying to cut through it. About 3.5 years ago, all of the Republican Party and 8 Democrats voted against raising the minimum wage during a COVID relief package. And that absolutely infuriated me. Here we are. It was in the middle of a global pandemic. 1 million Americans died. And we were out there with pots and pans cheering on essential workers. And we're happy to cheer them on, but we're not happy to pay them anything they can live on. And this is also true of the Democratic Party, which now again is all confused about why working people don't want to vote for them. Well, one thing is you won't pay them anything that they can live on. So screw you too. So anyway, we took a trip to West Virginia, drove all over West Virginia, stopping people in the Dollar General parking lot. Then we went to Kentucky, drove all over Kentucky, talking to people about taxes and wages. And these two deep red Republican states, it turns out everybody basically agrees with us. They think that working people don't make enough money, that working people's taxes are too high, and rich people are getting away with murder. So everybody agrees with everybody else. The issue is that they don't use their political power to solve that problem. And so we picked 2 places with our Great Economy Project. We picked a little town in North Carolina called Whiteville, and we picked a town in Wisconsin called Richland Center. And for the last 3 years, we have been running programs there to try to educate people in both of those communities across the political divide, how the economy is rigged against them, the effect it's having on their community, and the incredible amount of power they have to change it. And so we've talked to them about CEO pay. We've shown them how the tax code is structured. We've talked to them about wages. We've talked to them about everything from the estate tax to corporate taxes and everything in between. And then we're trying to build community too, saying, come on in, have supper with us, learn a little bit about the economy, and then learn how much power you have to change this. And so both of these areas have very powerful politicians, both at the state level and at the federal level. Ron Johnson, who is the senator from Wisconsin, he is on the Senate Finance Committee. So he has a ton to say about how this tax code is structured. We've got Tom Tillis and Ted Budd in North Carolina, both of those lawmakers. They see North Carolina is routinely rated one of the best places to do business. And the last 2 years running, it's been the worst place to work, according to Oxfam. And so we've really got to pull these different threads together and get folks across the political aisle setting aside their social differences to focus on money. And that's what we're trying to orchestrate in both of these programs. How do we get people understanding how the economy is rigged and working to fix it?
Yeah, I love that you kind of like the idea of creating these case studies, these stories and storytelling and showing that it actually can be possible in a place like Wisconsin and North Carolina, where there is actually a lot of there is this huge inequality, right, in those places. Yeah, I just pulled up Richland Center and there is also an echo of, like of political movements and rights, right? I just
Well,
see this.
Wisconsin has a whole cool backstory about the Wisconsin idea. If you want to learn more about what we've tried to do in these local places, because this is the thing, when you talk about indie, everybody's, on their device and, getting all their news and information from the device. I mean, I think the best way to counter that is to get people in rooms with each other, actually talking to each other. Nobody is quite as scary. I always think about that song, people are strange when you're a stranger, people look ugly when you're alone. That's the thing. And so we really went into this great economy project with the idea being that the vast majority of people are really in agreement. They think working people need to make more money. They shouldn't pay taxes as high as they are, and rich people are getting away with murder. So if we can just get together on those ideas, I think we can fix some stuff. So the Deciders movie is a movie about the project that we ran in North Carolina. It was our very first project. You see folks across the political spectrum coming together. We invited people. We said, come in. If you have supper with us, we'll give you $50.
Nice.
And so we're going to give you supper. This great place called Dale's Seafood. It's a hot hopping spot in Whiteville. Invited people to Dale's Seafood, gave them $50 to come and to have a few economic lessons. And so over 8 sessions, we taught them a whole bunch of stuff about how the economy was rigged. We had some of our Patriotic Millionaire members go down there and climb into it with them, talk about, why they as millionaires aren't trying to be that nice. We just want to live in a great country. Who
Right?
wants to be a rich man in a poor country? Better to be a rich man in a rich country.
Yes.
And so then after 8 sessions, we were like, all right, what do you want to do about it? And so these decider folks are doing something about it. They're getting their sea legs. They've gone to talk to their lawmakers. They've gone to do a protest on tax day. They're going out into their communities at fields and festivals and talking to the folks in their towns about wages and taxes, which is not a Republican issue. It's not a Democratic issue. This is money. And it's
Yeah.
money that's either in your community or not in your community. It's money that is, in your pocketbook so you can afford to put dinner on the table or not. And we've structured an economy that sucks.
Yeah, and I want to reflect that how important it is to call people in, but also to support them. I mean, the fact that you fed them, you paid them a little bit. I mean, it's nominal, but it's not. It's like there is a sense of I don't know. There's a invitation that comes with a gift, and I think that's missing in our culture is that we don't is inviting folks and supporting folks to who want to care, right? Like, how do we support those people who are already showing us they want to care for their community, right? And so I just want to reflect that's super important that you guys
You
did
know
that.
what? That's totally right. And the way I looked at it, I was like, it's time. I want to have respect for their time. And I'm asking them to come in and, spend some time looking at charts and graphs of marginal tax rates. I think the least I can do is give them a seafood dinner and, pay them roughly the equivalent of what I think they should be making at their job. So we pay, about $20 an hour or whatever. Most of our sessions are a couple hours long. So $50 a session, come on in. And because I want these folks to see what respect for their time looks like. I want you to come in and learn something because I want you to be empowered to then go to your lawmakers and be like 7.25 an hour is not enough to support a flea.
Yeah.
Raise the wage floor.
Exactly, exactly. And storytelling is key. And the fact that you guys brought people together. I've been hosting citizen assemblies myself, and I've also found this. I was hosting them in rural places in Hawaii, throughout California, in rural and urban places. And I'm like flabbergasted that when you bring together people around what they're concerned about, what they're worried about, nobody talks about the national politics. Like nobody cares about international politics. Like that doesn't even come up. Like these polarized things when you create the space for people to talk about the concerns and also to holding the space of what are the solutions. People want to collaborate, actually. It's not what we're seeing in the national media is not really what it is when you bring people together.
That's right. And I mean, I have my father-in-law loves Donald Trump more than anything. He has two MAGA hats, and I don't love Donald Trump. I
He wears
think
them on top of each other.
I mean, almost, but when he and I get into conversations about basically how do you structure an economy so the vast majority of people can kind of make it work, you know, I cannot tell you the level of agreement we have. So this is it. It's the money agenda. You can find it on patrioticmillionaires.org. It's cost of living tax cut, cost of living wage, equalized ordinary income and capital gains rate. So money is money is money. Doesn't matter how you make it. And then the last piece, which is really the most consequential piece, is we've got to break up this oligarchical wealth. And so there are a few different pieces you need to do that. There's trust reform. There's, taxing unrealized capital gains. There's a bunch of stuff in that that is a little bit more on the complicated side to write the legislation, but we're working hard on that. We've got some pieces of legislation. We've got a big piece of legislation coming out in a couple of weeks that we've been working with some lawmakers on. But the thing to understand about this is, we have corporations that are monopolies, and we have said that's not something we want in a market economy. And so if we have corporations that are monopolies, if corporations are people and people are corporations, and if corporations have monopolies and they can't, then people shouldn't have monopolies either. So let's really just focus as a group on breaking up wealth, because I'll tell you, no one on the planet is worth $200 billion. Do you know what I'm saying? They control $200 billion. These people control too much of our economy. It is damaging to our democracy. They must have less money.
I mean, I would even put it there. I mean, if you go through history and you find the people who might be worth $200 billion, like Leonardo da Vinci or Tagore or Nikola Tesla, they would be creating things for the community. Like they would not, they were, if they, whoever's worth that much money, they're creating things for the world, you know?
That's
Um,
right. That's
that
right. And the thing that they are creating is worth for the world. It is not worth for themselves. Jonas Salk created a level of worth for the world in the creation of the polio vaccine. So I think that's how we should look at it. And we really don't want people controlling this much. People can be a little nuts, and I think we've seen what happens when people get a little bit too much. They start reading their own press releases,
yeah.
start wreaking a bunch of havoc. God bless them. I wish they'd spend a little teeny bit of that fortune on some therapy. Because I do think on a really human level, I think there's an emptiness
Yeah.
that is demanding to be filled. And they're not going to feel it that way. I really wish somebody explain them. This exercise you're engaged in. It does not matter how much money you make. It's never going to fill that hole, but there are ways to fill that hole. In the meantime, we as a society need to use the power we have to make different decisions about how we structure our political economy. How do we structure our economy? Those decisions are made in the political arena. How do we use the political arena to structure an economy that creates a stable, rich, prosperous, amazing
Yeah.
country? That's where I want to live.
Yep, I love that, Erica. And I can't help but it's something alive. I just a couple of days ago met a buddy of mine who's working with like very wealthy leaders, right? And one of them was a Middle Eastern guy who was like, I'm scared to make these changes and be involved in something like that. He didn't even know that this exists, but he's scared because he thinks he's alone and he's going to get in trouble for changing the direction. And he comes from a lot of wealth, and so I think you guys creating this space for people with wealth to not be in it by themselves to want to change the system, but be in a community to do it is really critical too. So thank you for doing that. A couple of, I mean, I feel we can this conversation can be really long, and I'm really excited that this is just the beginning. I hope you keep coming back with more updates with this, and that we can like rally folks, folks with wealth, but also folks who want to build wealth, who want to work hard and build wealth as well. What are some call to actions that you have for this? Like, what are some ways that people can engage with this from the different walks of life people are coming at?
Well, so listen, I really believe this cost of living tax cut should have appeal for everybody.
Mhm.
So I want to laser focus our attention on this. Costoflivingexemption.com. You can also go to costoflivingtaxcut.com. You can just go to Patriotic Millionaires website, find this, sign up. We are hand delivering a bunch of signatures to lawmakers a couple of weeks from now. And then when the legislation itself is introduced, we will be pushing people to call their lawmakers. So this is, I think, number one. So understand that this is about money. Let me tell people some specific things to do. Number one, understand that this is about money. Number two, Lean into this specific solution. It is very simple. It is very straightforward. It should appeal to people all the way across the spectrum. It's a direct benefit to stabilize working families who are under an enormous amount of pressure. So pick this. And then the last thing is just picking up on what we said earlier. Never underestimate the power of a small group of people to change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has. A small group of deeply committed people. That's the exact quote from Margaret Mead. Find your small group of people who you want to work with. So if you're wealthy and you want to be part of this rich resistance, as we think about it, join Patriotic Millionaires. If you're not wealthy, but you want to be part of our activity, either join this specific position or sign up on our website to be one of our partners in progress. So we will be telling you, here's a call you can make, here's an article you should read, here's a thing you should support. People can get engaged in that way. But find that small group of deeply committed people and then focus on the money. Focus on the money.
I love that. Okay, and last question I got for you is, let's say this goes through and it happens, and 5 years from now, 6 years from now, right? The bills have passed. This is happening. What's happening? What's happening in the country? Like, what's the breaking out of the glass ceiling? And also, I'm curious, what's happening with you? Because I know you've written books and you've done. What are you doing when this mission is accomplished?
Well, so this mission has lots of steps, and this is the first step. So,
Wow.
one of the things you learn strategy is knowing what door to open first so you can gain enough power and momentum to open the next door and the next door. To me, this is the simplest, easiest, most straightforward first step to stabilize our economy and our society.
Mm.
Second piece, raise the minimum wage itself to the cost of living. Third piece, money is money is money, equalize tax rates no matter how you make it. And then the fourth piece, break up the oligarchs. And so I think I've got enough work to do that I'll probably be at this for a while. So if I'm looking out 4 or 5 years from now, I've got a significantly smaller number of working people who are struggling. I hear people saying, you know what? I don't feel like the system is as rigged as it was. I feel like it's a system that I understand that kind of makes sense to me. I'm getting paid fairly for the work that I do. I'm contributing to my community once I've taken care of myself. And I feel like I'm more in harmony because we don't have a special group of people who are getting all the bennies of the world while everybody else is getting screwed. So people are just basically walking around. And then what do I actually think will happen? I think I will be less worried that my kid's going to get shot in school. I mean, that's the thing. I have 2 more days for a fourth grader and soon to be rising fifth grader. We have turned up the heat in this country so high. People are so mad and so upset. It threatens everyone. And you cannot escape from that danger that we have created by building a fear-based economic system that is centered on human exploitation. That is not going to work for anyone. And so I hope that we're sitting here 5 years from now, just kind of being back to being, ticked off at politicians in all the ways that it used to be fun to be ticked off at politicians instead of feeling like you're in some game of existential dread every minute of the day. And the fact is, like, both parties have failed the American people. The American political system as a whole over multiple decades screwed working people, delivered all of its resources to the top. And so let's stop doing that. Let's get politicians who think that's a good way to structure things, regardless of what political party they're in charge, and get some people on the bus to, get the things righted. And then, like, let's go to a ball game.
Yeah.
I mean, let's have fun. Life is supposed to be fun and, soulful and interesting. And that's what it's supposed to be. It's not supposed to be a constant fight.
No. And I imagine what kind of innovations, art, community we can, and cultural integration can happen from those places when we're not scared or in fear mode. So,
Well,
um,
and you look at it like, I mean, I remember reading somewhere that, like, if everybody was the same, one of them's redundant. Like, if I agree with somebody on everything, one of us is redundant. It's really is so much more fun and interesting to have a whole bunch of people who are all kinds of different things where you don't have to travel to a foreign country to see somebody who's different.
yep.
You can go down the street to a restaurant that you've never heard of from a cuisine. That's fun. It's more fun than everybody being the same. The problem is not all the differences. The problem is that everybody's struggling. That's the difference. So we have to fix the struggle part. And then we can have a greater emotional security from which to see how cool it is
Yep. Yep. And the
to
struggle
have all kinds of different people.
and
My
still,
sister always says, my sister's a big Christian. And she always says, isn't it great that we're all so different? Isn't it great that God made us all so different? That's
that's
cool.
That's really beautiful. I love that. That's so beautiful. And you know the struggle is universal. It's not Republican, Democrat, right, left, MAGA, whatever. Everybody's struggle is actually very universal. So we can be compassionate universally. So that's beautiful. Thank you, Erica. Do you feel complete? Anything else you want to share or get off your chest or your head?
I mean, just thank you so much for having me. I love talking about this stuff. I love sharing some really simple ideas with people that can make things so much better. And I just really appreciate you giving me the opportunity to come on because it's not that hard and
I
we can do
know.
it.
We could do it. I didn't even like mention donut economics, which I'm working on and you know articulating, but it's very relevant to what you guys are doing in the sense of demystifying money and making money as money medicine and like not being scared of money, not being like turned off by money, but let's reimagine and reclaim our relationship with money and currency and economics because it's been stripped from most of us, right? Even if you come from a family that's hardworking and makes money, there is a toxic relationship with money. So I'm glad you're doing this. I'm glad we're all reimagining and reclaiming economics in a beautiful way. So thank you so much too.
Absolutely. Thank you, Indy.
Yeah.